Money also matters to the people who are running the organizations and helping bring in that revenue. And so it's an important part of the conversation just as much as their compensation. And so we do have, part of our survey does include practice administrator compensation. And so you can take that data and again, look at it up against yours by all of the filters. We can go to the next slide. There we go. So again, all the filters are there. We have a good number of administrator types. I know that, in smaller practices, you're talking practice administrators, where in bigger practices like Terry's, you have a full-on CEO. Regions matter. All of those different filters are there. And so you can see this broad industry average at the onset. And then as you start to filter things to match what your specific role is in the geography, where you are in the population of your state, those kind of things, you can get a really good idea of where your wage lines up. And if any discrepancies are there, then you can bring that to your physicians and talk about, ensuring that the income that you're making is more accurate to fair market value and really reflects the value that you bring to your practice. Our roles are very valuable. And so when you can show, and this is where you would even use the reports that we've already gone over to prove your value. So it isn't just about your bottom line salary either. If you can look at data from, these reports go back to 2014. If you came into a practice in 2014 and they were really struggling, and you had the data from AAOE all the way back to 2014, and then your own data that you can compare to that and show them progressively how you've been a valued practice and how you've increased revenue or, made efficiency better or decreased low overhead. All of those things can go into play as well. And so you can show them a good long, stretch of the value that you've brought to the practice when you are asking for an increase in your own compensation. MGMA, I know they don't have filters like this. When you look at MGMA data, it's not specific to orthopedics. I don't believe it's specific to any other geography or anything like that either. So for us to be able to drill down into this data on a practice administrator level is really, really helpful as well. Again, you want to look at any issues that there might be before you ask for a raise. You want to ensure that things are really going as smoothly as you think they might be, fix any problem areas before you go to them with that. But again, with the results that we have in our survey and the way that you're able to filter them out, you can really, really show that information to a fine detail. Terry or Tara, do you have any comments here?
Yeah, I think you made some great points, Olivia. I mean, obviously, this graph here shows, where you fall in the scale, which can help you when you're going to your shareholders for a raise. But being able to show them, historical data and show them the value you brought to the practice is invaluable. If you can go in there and show them, here's where overhead was, here's where it is, things like that. Here's where physician compensation was, here's where it is now, here's where staff cost was, here where it is now. All the other graphs we've looked at and several other that the survey collects can be invaluable. I don't think any of us are gonna, look at that and think and it tells you if you probably deserve one. There probably are some administrators who feel they deserve one, but if they look at their data, maybe the practice isn't performing well, and that might influence the decision. So I think certainly, not just looking, like you said, at this core report, but looking at where your practice stands and being able to use that information to your advantage is huge, because most doctors are numbers people, and they want to see the numbers, and if you can show that to them, I think you can demonstrate your value.
Mm-hmm. I would also just add that I think having data behind you makes somewhat of an uncomfortable conversation a lot easier, because you can show the data. It's not just you coming to somebody saying, hey, I think I need a raise and this is why. It's look at this information and here's what it supports. And to me, it makes that kind of conversation much easier to have because you have something backing you up. It's not just your opinion or your thoughts. It's actual real data behind it.
Mm-hmm. Yep, data can take emotions out of decisions for sure, and so it's good to have that as a weapon in your arsenal, so to speak. Do we have any questions to be read right now?
No, we had one question that I answered in writing, but I can read it for you. It's a question regarding expense as a percentage of revenue table. There's the expense total operating expenses was minus physician salary. So really what the definition of those operating expenses were. And so yes, operating expenses are the total expenses before physician expenses. And those physician expenses include compensation and other direct expenses.
Yes. Yeah, that's very good to note, actually. You know, even on a month-to-month or quarterly basis, when you're showing overhead to your physicians, making sure that their you know, salary is not included in that. It gives a little more accurate picture there. Let's see. We can go to the next slide if there's no other comments here. So when we're talking about getting a raise, you know, stating the issue is important, and how you state it is important. Using verbiage like fair market value and the value that you bring to the practice. You know, you don't ever want to come across as disgruntled. It's about the value that you bring is where I think you would probably really want to focus on that, and then just state the issue that you're, you know, requesting a raise, and then start talking about the data. Present the data that shows your contribution to the practice. You know, when efficiency is running better, maybe it's the front desk efficiency, and so collections at the front desk are increasing because people are paying their portion at the time instead of being allowed to walk out the door. You know, because as soon as a person walks out the door, you know, the likelihood of getting the patient portion then goes down. And so if you increase efficiency at the front desk, that is going to show in the revenue. And the benchmarking data, share the relevant benchmarks. Again, pull out all of the things that make up the whole picture that show where those efficiencies are being made and where that value is coming from. And then comparing the data. You can look at similar practices. It's really a good tool to be able to say, okay, here's a practice of our size in a similar demographic with the same number of population that they're serving, and you know, our percentage of revenue as it relates to overhead is lower, and so we're actually doing very, very well according to the industry average. So making those comparisons is very good. And then you can also, you know, recommend solutions if you did find some problem areas. You know, you can say, look, these things need to be fixed, and once they are, then, you know, this is what I'd like where the conversation would need to go after that. Clarify what you want. So, Terry or Tara, do you have any other tips on how to bring this particular piece?
The one thing I'd say, where we mentioned share relevant benchmarks, you know, besides just the general, the broad overview stuff, you know your practice and you know your physicians. I know when I walk into a board meeting and I hand out the financial reports, I know the number each of my physicians is going to look at first, and it's not the same number for every one of them. So make sure you're including the benchmarks that you know are relevant to each person. You know, I've got some guys, the first thing they're going to look at, all they care about is their overhead rate. I've got some, the first thing they're going to look at is compensation. I even have one old school guy, the first thing he's looking at is employee expense. So, you know your practice and you know what's important to each physician. So make sure you're highlighting the things that are going to benefit you with each physician, because chances are if you're going to get a raise, it's going to come down to a vote. And you want to make sure that the physicians have the data that they feel is important for them to make the decision that benefits you.